I am Sabrin. My pronouns are she, her. I am Palestinian Italian. My mother was Italian. My Palestinian side is my father, and I was born in a village between Ramallah and Jerusalem. And I grew up between the two countries, more or less, definitely culturally wise. The accent, however, is deeply Italian. And I'm now here in the UK, and I teach at university, and I teach creative writing for activism. But I think for the sake of what we're gonna do now, it's probably good to say that I have a PhD in creative writing and history, as then my supervisor was Professor Ilan Pape. So I hope if he watches this, that he's gonna forgive me.
So my name is Farah. I sometimes go by Sammie. I am Palestinian Jordanian. My pronouns are she, they. I've grown up in Jordan my whole life. I never got a chance to go to Palestine, unfortunately, as with a lot of Palestinians due to circumstances there and to barriers to us being able to go there. But having grown up in Jordan, Palestine has always also been our cause, as it is with the rest of the Jordanian people. Growing up in Jordan is very different to what I realized coming to the UK is that a lot of people are not aware of what's going on in Palestine, and they do not know much about the politics that is involved as well, or the case of things there. But yeah, I also studied clinical psychology, which is it's very relevant, but not to these questions, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, in a way.
Yeah, in a way they are, yeah.
Should we start with the questions then?
Yeah, let's go.
So the first one asks, I would like to learn more about the ancient history of the land and how it developed over time as the land was occupied.
I think it's important to also mention like which part of ancient history
exactly.
as well. Yeah, because there is a lot of history. It's a hub for human activity as well. So
we're probably speaking about one of the longest continuously lived area in the whole world. So when we talk about ancient history, is like how far back do we want to go? To which extent do we want to look at ancient history as a way to understand what is happening now, or as a way to understand how it's used to justify what is happening now? It's an interesting question, but it could be quite huge to approach, isn't it?
I think like if it's broken down to different questions about like specific topics, it might be easier because like, again, as Sabrin said, it is one of the first places that were settled in by humans as well. So like if we're going to talk about the ancient history, maybe if we talk about even like what is relevant to now, are we going to go back as far as British Mandate Palestine, or before that to the Ottoman rule? There's a lot, or even before that to like biblical times. There's a lot to unpack there as well.
Yeah, and to be honest, we could even I'm thinking also about the Roman times there. That it's a very interesting things to look at in terms of then how we can use that to understand or frame what is happening now. I would suggest that probably rather than answer this question directly, maybe suggest something to read. So I have a book down here that it's probably one of the most known in terms of looking at Palestinian history. And it's Nur Masalha, Palestine, a 4,000 years history. So it looks back 4,000 years. So I guess that it can help looking at lots of different historical times, and I checked today, is actually on sale. It's kind of a good one.
I think it would like offer like a good starter, a good starter of information. But then the amount of reading that you would have to do as well is like it's not just one book that will explain everything. There's many books that can be, and I think there's a question specifically about books which we can come back to as well.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the only thing I would like to say about when it comes to history that I think is going to be important then for other questions that we have later, is that there is this sort of statements that is used a lot in propaganda saying, but there was never a Palestinian state, right? And it's, first of all, it's kind of historically inaccurate to say that, because the nationalist movement and national self-determination is something quite modern in any way in terms of history. But also Palestine was under Ottoman rules, under the Ottoman empires. And at the end of the Ottoman empires, a lot of the areas that now are nation and countries, they were all trying to fight for self-determination. And that, of course, went completely downhill when the Ottoman Empire lost World War I. And then the British mandates took over, and then we can talk about it later. But yes, that is probably something that we can address straight away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and I think like in terms of like ancient history, I think I always kind of, especially in holidays, I kind of like to remind people that Jesus was also Palestinian in a way.
Yes.
And I always like use it as a way to like just educate people briefly at the fact that the people that were there, that were Jewish back in the day of Moses, were the same people who became Christians in the time of Jesus, were the same people who also became Muslim later on. They are the same people, although their religions may have varied and although the languages spoken may have varied, but they are the same people.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to what's currently happening, it's also the fact that this is an external colonization from people who are not indigenous to the land. And that is something that we can also go into.
Yeah. And there is definitely a continuation of people who have lived on the land. Okay, should we go on the second one?
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you love about the land, the wild parts, and nature there? This is a very personal one.
I think also because our experiences are different. Like what I know about the land is what I know from growing up to stories and having like lived like alongside it and seeing it from afar and having like that kind of connection with it. But you have a very deep connection with having been born there as well and lived there.
I probably for me it's kind of a mixed experience as well, because despite having, I was born there and I have spent there quite, a good part of my life. But I have also lived away from it, and for many years I was not allowed back and all of that. So there is also this, leaving the land and the embodiment and the body in the land, but there is also a lot of the dreaming of, the desire of, the stories and the memories of other people. But if I have to answer directly, one of my favorite things when I go to the West Bank, because that's where my family is from. And I usually spend my time mostly in Bethlehem, Ramallah, and Birzeit. And probably for me, one of the most connection for me, it's the sunset on the hills of Birzeit. Extremely beautiful, the colors, and it's such a strong orange, and the hills are these rocky hills. Yeah, there is something quite moving about it, and I wanna just share that because it's actually something that I find it quite uncanny, is that if you go in certain areas in the West Bank and look towards the Mediterranean Sea, especially at sunset, you will be able to see the sea. But before you see the sea, you see the skyline of Tel Aviv, like black against the orange of the sunset. And it's quite crazy and quite uncanny thinking that you actually can get there. And that was built on your ancestral land. Kind of jolt you back into reality a little bit, because Palestine can be so beautiful. There is this beautiful book by Raja Shehadeh called Palestinian Walks. And he talks about how the walks around Ramallah have been changing for the past 50 years. And once again, it's a very uncanny reading. It's beautiful all at the same time. So yes, my favorite part is definitely sunset. I know it's quite cheesy, but there you go.
I've realized recently that sunset also is very different depending on where you are.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah. I think like that reminds me, the way you said about like seeing it and not being able to be there. It's kind of, for me, like, it reminds me of like standing on a mountain in Jordan or across the Dead Sea and looking at Palestine. And like, it's something that we used to do very often, is that we would like go sit on a mountain and where we would have a really good view of Palestine, and we could just sit there and stare at it and want to be there, but we know that we can't be there. And I know like when I was younger, I would know of people, like, because when, like, back then it wasn't so militarized, I want to say. So people could actually swim across the Dead Sea and come back and be like, we reached the other side and now we're back. So that was...
Yeah, that would be impossible.
Now it would be impossible. And like, I think for me as well, it's like also the stories that I saw, how they kind of changed people around me, like the way that my grandparents would cultivate their own lands in memory of the lands that they grew up in. So like my grandpa would talk so passionately about like orange fields and things like that. And it's something, let's say, it's an image that I never got to experience myself, but like walking through his farm and seeing how he would grow his trees as well would make me think about how it would have been for him growing up in those orange fields as well.
Yeah, that's another aspect about nature in Palestine, I think, is like, it's not a full enjoyment. When we talk about it, both in literature and academia, we actually call about double dispossession, because not only you have lost the orange tree, or you can, for example, there is a law for which you can forage certain natural herbs. And there is a beautiful movie about it called The Foragers, that talks about the law that
stops people
from foraging in the wild. So you not only you are dispossessed physically of something, but also you are dispossessed from enjoying that thing without having to connect with the symbol of resistance that it became. So yeah, wow. The third one, it's one that I kind of liked and kind of intimidating. Okay, why wasn't an independent Palestinian state created between 1948 and 1967?
I think a big part of understanding that is also understanding what happened in 1948 and like before 1967 and what led to 1967 in the first place as well.
So 1948 is why it's called the Nakba, and 1967 is why it's called the Naksa. 1948 is when the Israeli state was created.
And I think like to understand it also is to like, you do need to understand a bit of the history that led up to it as well, with the like Zionist militias and how they... And the way that the Israeli state was created was basically on, it's such a heavy thing, but it's on the corpses of our grandparents in a way. It's like people were murdered, they were massacred, they were told, like if I were telling it from my grandparents' point of view, the way that they explained it to me was that they had no choice but to leave or die. And when they left, they were told that they would be allowed to come back in a few days' time, which is very similar to what we're seeing happen now.
Yeah.
During the Nakba, we all know, like now, I think it's not taking it for granted. I think we should all know that 500 cities and villages were destroyed, that over like 750,000 people were murdered and displaced. So that is a very good starting point as well.
The condition for which then 1948 happened and the Nakba happened, after that war, or if you want to call it war, but again, in Palestine, we call it the Nakba. Israel was controlling 78%, what is called historical Palestine. So that Palestinians were left with 22%. The Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The Gaza Strip was under Egyptian sort of rule, and the West Bank was under Jordan rule. However, they were never, that's another question that usually come up with why wasn't an independent state created between 1948 and 1967 is why Egypt and Jordan didn't absorb the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. One, because Israel would have never allowed it, especially for Jerusalem, to be absorbed into Jordanian land. And two, because if you were to do that, or if a Palestinian state was to be created in those 22% of territory, would actually de facto accept that you have lost the other 78% of your land, would be accepting the Nakba, would be accepting losing your territory,
never coming back to
never
your home
going
as
back
well.
to your home. You know, you have to understand that people literally have and still have the keys of their homes.
Growing up, like even we didn't have the keys, but we had like a picture of my grandpa's home in Palestine, and that is something that he held on to for as long as like he was like he's still alive, but he still holds on to that photo with the hope to go back. So that's
like there is another beautiful book. I'm sorry about that. I will talk about books every now and then anyway, because it's what I do. I love books. There is this a book called Golda Slept Here by writer and architect Soad Amiri. And she talks about how some people in Jerusalem literally go on tours to go and see their grandparents' house that now are occupied. And they can see them and they can't go in. And they actually, if they try to get close, they are shot at. So you have to understand that by creating an independent state on the land that was left to us after 1948 would be to renounce to what was our house. It was our land, our orchards, our olive trees. There was and there still is the hope that actually we can live in the historical Palestine from the river to the sea.
Yeah, and it's like you said, in some ways it would have been a betrayal to those who had lost their homes as well, because like accepting the status quo would mean that we are giving up on the parts that we cannot reach yet. And I don't think that it's in people's nature to give up on their home and their lands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another big issue is the refugee issue. So by creating a state on the 22% that was left after 1948 would also renounce to the fact that refugees, that we were speaking about almost 1 million refugees between internal displaced and externally displaced, would not come back. While that was and still is one of the main requests and one of the main thing for peace is to allow all the people who have been displaced to come back. So it's not just, why you don't create a state. It's not that easy. There is a lot that we need to talk about. And I think some of the question
will help us
go into that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So if Palestine were to get its own state, two-state solution, for example, what do you imagine this country would be like based on how the Palestinian Authority and Hamas govern today? That's so the two parts of the question, it does seem a bit like a trick question. So with the first part, it's would you imagine this country to be like? I will answer this differently than with the rest of the question, I think, because I wouldn't see, like, when I see a free Palestine, I do not think that I disagree with most Palestinians when I say that I don't see it being governed the way that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas govern today, if we are to say that they govern at all today, if that makes sense.
There is no two-state solution. Whoever is talking about two-state solution is really just throwing dust into our eyes. It's almost impossible to have a two-state solution. I'm not even gonna talk about ideas and dreams and utopias. It's just physically impossible. First of all, Gaza is almost completely destroyed, so that also make it sort of impossible.
Also, going back to the answer to the previous question about how a two-state solution would be a concession in some way or a betrayal in some way as well.
Yeah, and also it's physically impossible. Like if you go to the West Bank, it's literally like, it's not a geographically connected, consistent entity. First of all, there is a separation wall or apartheid wall that it's illegal under international law, that it's literally dividing the land. And even if it's not divided by the walls, it's divided by the illegal settlements, again, illegal under international law. And so to dismantle the whole thing so the only way to have a two-state solution, that I do not believe in, but the only way to have a two-state solution will be to, one, rebuild fully Gaza, and two, to dismantle the whole apartheid system in the West Bank, and also destroy all the settlements so that the Palestinians actually can have geographical consistency and connection. And you see how much more destruction and trauma and problems that this will create, even if it has to happen. A lot of Palestinians really believe in one state, again, from the river to the sea, where there is equal rights for all its citizens. Do you feel that it's your view as well?
It is definitely my view. So as most Palestinians will also confirm, because we understand the history, I do not believe in an Israeli state. I'll kind of like say it outright, is that I don't believe in Israel as a state. The whole formation of Israel for me is illegal, and it's what I see with a free Palestine, like you said, from the river to the sea. I see a land where we all get to live with all of our rights, with all of our equality, and where we get, as people, we get to govern. We get to choose what is best fitting for us as people, not other people kind of telling us what needs to happen, if that makes sense. I see it the way that my grandparents described it in the past, a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic space that everyone feels safe in, which is, you know, like the way that it was described to me as a child is that it was a place where people from different ethnicities, from different religions lived together as neighbors and friends. And that is how I've always pictured it in my head. I have not pictured it as a place where anyone would be oppressed or anyone's rights would be kind of trampled on. When I say a free Palestine, I mean, like, I see a free Palestine for all of us who live there. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And in terms of the Palestinian Authority, I can tell you no Palestinian right now wants the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is literally a puppet of Israel.
And they do not represent us right now in the way that they govern. They do not represent the Palestinian people and our interests and our wants.
Yeah. And again, they're not really in charge. They're not really in power. I don't know if you recently, a couple of days ago was that Israel can decide to, for example, cut off the bank system of the Palestinian Authority from the rest of the world. That is what is called occupation. The fact that you can actually cut off the bank system of a country or an entity from the rest of the world without them having any possibility to bypass that. And the same apply for taxes. The same apply for, like, the Palestinian Authority doesn't have any army. You know, they have a sort of police body that is actually in collaboration with Israel. So the Palestinian Authority has to be dismantled because it's a puppet.
The Palestinian Authority aids in the oppression of the Palestinian people, and this is something we're all aware of.
While when it comes to Hamas, I think there are, once again, that would be another question altogether. The fact is that Hamas was never seen itself as a governing body, but actually as an opposition body. And I think that it's, I'm sure that if and I hope when we will have one state, Hamas will doubtly have the majority behind it. So I really hope that when we get to liberation and freedom, we don't get attached to what it was in the past, but we really reshape, considering also all the refugees that needs to come back, all the Palestinians in the diaspora that needs to come back. They will reshape completely the political system.
And the thing is, like, as Hamas is a resistance effort, when there is no oppression to resist, the resistance effort will no longer be needed or relevant in that point. So it's kind of like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Israelis often state the first conflict was a defensive war and that a two-state solution was proposed, but Palestine refused. Is this true? Because every source points towards it.
Okay, I'm ready for this. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for this. So I think my first question was, which do you refer to as the first conflict? Which first conflict specifically? Do you know which one? Like,
I guess they are meaning 1948.
I mean, in my brain,
what is called the Arab-Israeli War.
Yeah, I mean, in my brain, I thought kind of like the 67 because that one was kind of, it was framed as a defensive war, even though it wasn't.
Yeah, I thought it was the 1948 because then it was, because it connects to the fact that the Palestinians refused the two-state solution, right? And so they deserve then the consequences of that refusal. Okay, should I go with some historical dates? Okay, so there you go. I have everything. So I think whoever asked this question referred to when the 1947 U.S. resolution, that's resolution 181, that is the partition of the Palestinian historical Palestine into, in theory, two entities, but actually three, where 55% of the land went to Israel. That, by the way, at that point, there went 1/3 of the population, and the other 45% went to Palestine and to the indigenous people, and Jerusalem was under international control. And then like how dare Palestinians refuse these partitions? And I'm like, my gut answer is like, so if someone come to your country or to your house illegally and takes it over, and then it tells you, okay, you can stay here, but you take the first floor and I take the ground floor, would you accept it? It's like, is the premises that was wrong? It feels like, oh, the Palestinian refused such a reasonable partition. The partition was not reasonable in the first place. No one had the authority to divide that piece of land and just say, okay, now this is Israeli. That it was a highly colonial, global north, Western types of policy, that you could just think that you can go into an indigenous land, divide it, and then the indigenous people have just to accept it. And if they don't, they are violent and unreasonable. That is absurd, okay? Not only, but what always makes my blood boil is that when there was World War I, and the Palestinian actually helped the British and the French fights against the Ottoman Empire, they did so with the promise of independency. And then the Balfour Declaration, that by the way, it's a declaration in 1917, where the British Empire promised to the Zionists a Zionist state in Palestine. On which ground, on which authority? That it's completely colonial mentality where you bypass completely the indigenous people and their needs and their rights of self-determination.
And the thing is that they knew it at the time as well. Like, they knew that they were in the wrong. Like,
Yes.
It's kind of like the fact that they knew already that it was the wrong thing to do and that they had no right to do so, which is why it took so long from that declaration to establish the Israeli state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the other things that people need to take into consideration. That UN partition on 1947, first of all, give 55% of the land to the 1/3 minority of the population, one. And then what was given in that territory were some of the major cities that had high Arab population. What were they supposed to do? And also they give almost all the sea line and almost all the agricultural land. So they literally took away from the Palestinians all their richness, all their ability to build their economies and their industry and their agricultural economy. Why the Palestinians should have accepted that is like, it blew my mind that people think that it's the reason why they now deserved to be wiped out from face of earth.
It is a big way to show us in modern times how the people in power or the victors write history themselves, because if left unchecked and if people did not hold on to these memories and to these things that we know, and people did not keep writing and talking about what was happening, then we wouldn't even know what had actually happened back then.
Yeah. And another thing that actually I want to say is that before the 15th of May 1948, then after that date, the war starts officially, right? We are speaking about already 440,000 people displaced, before May 15 or 1948. And also some of the main massacres were already been committed, including the massacre of Dar Yassin, who is one of the major triggering events of trauma of the Nakba. All of that happened before the 15th of May, 1948. So I feel like sometimes these sort of questions are ill-informed to start with. And actually that brings me to the second part of the question, is like, is it true because every source points towards it? And it's like every source? Like which source, right? Because it's actually, I'm going to talk about this in books, but not really every source points to it. No historical accurate one. What is the history behind all the fighting? And what is the reason for the boycotts and protests? Maybe the history behind all the fighting, we are kind of answering it.
Yeah, I wanted
question by question.
Yeah, I wanted to add like a very, very brief like timeline as well. In the 1800s, what's it called? Socialist Zionism? Is that what they called it back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, was formed. And it was, the idea of it was basically to find a nation for the Jewish people that was not specified at the time. Like, they did not specify at the time that it would be in Palestine. I think they looked into different areas.
Yeah, in Africa.
In Africa as well,
for example.
Rwanda, yeah. And then there was this proclamation made that they would be giving them a land without a people for a people without a land, which at that point someone even like mentioned, actually, like, the place that you've chosen, Palestine, does have people living in it. So how would you propose that we do this? So this started, I think, the ball rolling with people who were financially well off buying certain lands in Palestine and actually offering them to, like, lands. They were buying lands from, I think they were Turkish landowners at the time, and selling them off to Jewish people, which we can get into the legality of later at some point. But like, we all agree was like an illegal trade in the first place. But then afterwards, which is like during the Balfour Declaration and World War I, after that, when World War II happened and started, and there were some very anti-Semitic, and I think this is a very important part of the history, is that when anti-Semitism was on the rise in Europe, a lot of Jewish people were either forced or coerced to move to Palestine because they were given, like, they were accepted as refugees there.
Yeah, I think probably what has to be added to that is that the Balfour Declaration and a lot of the Zionist movements and European Zionists were not doing that in the interest of Jewish people. Actually, there was a lot of anti-Semitism behind the Balfour Declaration. It was the idea that if you could move Jewish away from Europe, you would get rid of them. So actually, that is very anti-Semitic to start with.
The whole thing kind of started with anti-Semitism as well, as like wanting to get rid of the unwanted people in Europe. And where in Palestine, they were not unwanted, they were actually welcome. They were welcomed and treated as part of the people that were already there. And this is also like in the telling of how we are told these stories from our elders and our grandparents. We are told that we welcomed them into our homes. Like, we didn't even build separate homes for them. We welcomed them into our homes. Afterwards, during World War II, a lot of the Zionist young people who were part of militias were also given arms and training by the British military so that they could fight for the British against the Nazis in World War II.
The fact that a lot of the Zionist militia were trained by the British.
A lot of these militias were also absorbed into the current IOF.
Yes.
So the IOF, or like the people that
we call it the IDF, but the IOF.
I call them something different, but the people who did the Nakba were those people who were absorbed into the IOF, and
and actually that is very well recorded.
Yeah.
So we will get to the book things, but I think one of the main book that everyone who really wants to understand how the whole Zionist movement built up and how we got where we are now has to read The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappé, who, by the way, is an Israeli historian. And he really shows, using archive material from Israel, it shows that the aim has always been to get rid of all Palestinians from Palestine. And also it shows exactly what you were saying right now, that a lot of the militias, pre-1948 militia, actually then became the official or secret services of then the Israeli state.
Yeah, I think as like a very simplified timeline. That is like a very simplified timeline pre-1948. The reason for the boycotts and protests is, with the boycotts, there is a very big system that is in place that is benefiting from the oppression of Palestinians. And there are certain players in the system that are pushing and supporting that oppression. So the boycotts are to kind of put a clog in that system. Like, if we boycott McDonald's, which is one of their biggest donors, then they have less money to donate to the IOF, who then have less kind of funds to use on weapons. Same with most of these companies, is that they do enable what's happening in Gaza right now. Like, we've seen pictures of restaurants giving IOF soldiers free meals and things like that, and that all enables them and it empowers them.
Not to speak about companies that literally invest in the whole
in weapons
tech
companies.
systems and weapon company. But the idea of boycotting, by the way, that the best way to learn about it is going to the BDS website. But the reason why the BDS came to be is because of the success of boycotting with South Africa apartheid. And it was boycotting on all levels, right? From sports to cultures, cutting off every ties that you have with a country and a government that is committing crimes against humanity. It's essential for the dismantling of those system of apartheid or the system of oppression or the system of colonization. So boycotting is because you literally have to cut the air out of the fire, right? You can't keep putting fuel on the fire.
Also, boycotting and protests are one of the many ways that we as people can come together and say, no, we reject this, we refuse what's happening, and we don't want it to happen in our names. The protests are specifically to raise more awareness and to demand that our government does better, all of our governments do better. But at the same time, it's a way of just saying that we reject all of this. It's at a point of just saying that we will not be subscribers to what is happening. We will not take part in it.
That is not in our names. That literally the protest is to highlight that this is not in our names. And also boycotting and protesting are probably some of the basic instruments and tools of democracy
that we can fight back with.
That we can fight back with in a completely legal, peaceful way. We live in a deeply capitalist society. If me as a consumer, if I don't even have the freedom to choose where to put my money, what are we even talking about? There is clearly a system of oppression then. And if they stop us from our freedom of boycotting, there is something extremely unsettling on governments starting to talk about laws to prevent people from boycotting, because that's our basic rights as consumer, if not as citizens.
Also, someone who has been attending protests quite regularly, I think they're absolutely a beautiful way to show solidarity and of even self-care in a way, because when I was sitting there watching and witnessing, it's so hard to sit there and do nothing. It's so hard to feel like there is nothing in your power that you can do in that moment to make a change. But when you are out there protesting, when you're out there shouting with people who also understand where you're coming from, you feel like you're in a safe space that contains you and your feelings. You can let your feelings out, and you're also showing the people of Palestine. You're showing them that we do stand with them, and this also helps. This helps them in many ways to kind of see that they are not alone in the fight. And this is something that we've been told multiple times, is that people in Palestine watch our protests. They feel that kind of solidarity that we send in our protests, and they know that we're there fighting with them. I think for me, it's one of those big things where I have started putting my Saturdays specifically aside for the protest, because A, it's solidarity, B, it's fighting back, and C, it's a big part of my self-care as well.
Yeah, they are amazing place of love and healing and community healing and community making and mini making.
Communal support, in a way that it's when I see a child grab the microphone and start chanting, and they are empowered because there are so many people around them that are following in their chants. That is such an empowering moment for that child as well. And it's beautiful to see people bringing their families in solidarity, even the dogs at the protests.
And that's another thing probably to say is these protests have been depicted as something violent and aggressive. I have been to the London ones, to the Cardiff ones, to the Bristol ones.
They are love marches. They are love marches. We are giving love to the people of Palestine and to each other in those moments.
100%. We're giving Palestine the two-state solution, not just incentivize terrorism, partake in October 7 and be given territory. I can imagine the tone of that question.
Yeah, I don't know how to start to unpack this even. There are so many things in this question. So we've covered the two-state solution bit, I think. To my satisfaction, we've covered that already.
For me, the problem with this question, as I said, it's the idea of giving Palestine. Once again, is very patronizing, very infantilizing, and very colonial. who is who to give something to,
to be given territory.
That is Palestinian territory. That is the territory of the indigenous people. Who is giving territory? That for me is very problematic in itself. It's who is the entity who decides when to give or not when to give territory to the indigenous people? I can almost flip the question back to whoever asked it. It's who is deciding the system of power that decide when to give or not to give territory based on who is not deserving, based on which values? The question is highly problematic in itself because it's...
Especially after we have uncovered or discussed the way that Israel came to be, which is the Nakba, which is another act of terrorism. It's another act of violence in which people gained land afterwards. So yeah, you can definitely flip that question as well.
Yeah. If someone answers, it's the UN who decide. It's then we need to start questioning based on what? I'm still a strong believer of the international law, but it has been applied quite randomly and with a lot of double standards. So I think that question in itself, it's highly problematic. We already said that we don't believe in a two-state solution. We already said that Palestinians have a right of self-determination because they are the indigenous people. I really don't think that question stands grounds as a question in itself. So do you not acknowledge that October 7 was a terrorist attack on Jewish people and Israel is retaliating on what occurred from being attacked by Hamas?
I think when it comes to October 7th, we are still, as I said before, we're still unsure about what actually happened on the day as to who was responsible to what deaths, because we do know after a lot of investigations that Israel themselves or the IOF themselves killed many of their people.
I feel like that question always want to hear something as a response. So I'm gonna start by saying this because I think it's gonna sort of clean the air already, because it's a question that it's sort of try to find the person or the people who answer faulty of something. It's oh, you see, you are extremist or you are violent or aggressor. And I think after 6 months of genocide, Palestinian people are sort of fed up to have to sort of justify themselves for the trauma and
It's kind of like they made the "do you condemn Hamas" question longer.
Yes.
And that's it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna start by saying something that Palestinians have repeated again and again and again, is that we condemn all crimes of war. They imply also the ones that have been committed on the 7th of October, even if there are a lot of investigations still going on. So we condemned, we have said it so many times by now. Of course, we condemn acts of war crimes, okay? Crimes of war. But that question takes what happened completely out of context. And it also somehow framed the ongoing genocide on our people just as retaliation. I think is just absurd, historically and humanly absurd. And also, I want to, whoever asked that question, I want them to go and really look at, under international law, what we are looking at right now. Because under international law, Gaza and the West Bank are occupied territories for which, by international law, Israel is responsible. By international law, when a country occupies another country, they are in charge of the well-being of the people they are occupying. First of all. Also, and I'm gonna give you again numbers that you can go and check. If you look at Resolution 3743, UN resolution of December 3rd, 1982, and I'm quoting from the resolution reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of people for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination, apartheid, and occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. So by international law, the Palestinians have the right to liberate themselves, even if that means armed struggle. We may agree or disagree with violence, but you can't deny people resistance.
And I think that's like my point as well, is it depends also on how you contextualize the meaning of terrorist as well, because in the West, there's this quickness to say that anything that is Arab is angry or violent in the first place, or like that that people of other nations are violent for no reason. It's kind of a rhetoric that is kind of like a very Western way of looking at the world. And, you know, as an Arab, we grew up with the joke that, oh, you can't say bomb in the presence of an Arab, or we'll find the police around us, because we are all kind of like, because of Islamophobia and a lot of things, we are all kind of like used to being referred to as terrorists.
We are profiled
immediately. We're profiled as terrorists. So
yeah,
with the quickness to jump to call any resistance effort a terrorist attack as well, we need to actually come to understand what we mean by terrorism and what context terrorism comes under as well.
Yes.
Armed resistance is not terrorism always. And like, it's understanding also the role of, for me, what I also think is terrorism is when people will sit on a mountain and watch other people get bombed and call it like...
And cheers.
and call it like the cinema. So for me, that is terrorism. For me, the killings that have happened prior to October 7th, in like the killing of Palestinian children, of Palestinian people prior to October 7th, that's also terrorism. But it's kind of done under the cover or the guise of a state just killing people, or like the fact that we all know that the reason that October 7th happened was because there are many Palestinian prisoners, or actually hostages, that are being kept in Israeli prisons without charge and without trial, and illegally, that were detained illegally. And this is thousands, including children. So when we think about all of that context, we need to really sit down and think about like why that happened. Why did these people feel like they were compelled to do that? Whether we agree with it or not is not relevant to what is happening right now in Gaza either. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I was thinking about the definition of terrorism, right? Terrorism means using terror strategy, terrorize people, institution, and company into doing something. As Sammie was saying, this is what happened to Palestinians for the last 70 years. We have literally been terrorized and brutalized into abandon our land, or emigrating, or living in poverty. You know, I'm gonna share a personal thing. I had in my family multiple arrests and destructions. And what the last arrest in my family actually happened to the son of my cousin, underage minor, that was arrested in the middle of the night from the house. They came into the house and they beat him in front of my cousin, his mother. And he was taken away, abducted while bleeding. And they didn't know even from where he was bleeding, and then was put under what is called administrative detention, that it's detention without charges. It's usually up to 6 months, but it can be renewed again and again. And for months, we didn't know on which charges my cousin, the son of my cousin, was brought in. We didn't know what was happening to him. When they finally released him, after a lot of international pressure, my cousin, his name is Shadi, he told about being tortured, psychologically abused. Even now is still in home detention without clear accusations. So don't you think that is terrorizing? Don't you think that is terrorism on minors? What I think people sometimes don't understand is the huge amount of violence people are living all their life. If you are a Palestinian, especially if you are a Palestinian that at some point went through the West Bank or Gaza, you have been abused in a way or another. And think about what that does psychologically to a whole community. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, that really makes me...
No, I get it, because I'm coming from the same perspective as well.
Yeah, of course. Can I go and talk about books a little bit?
Yeah,
Makes me always
let's
happy.
do the book question.
Okay.
What are some good books on the history of Palestine?
Okay, so I kind of named a few already, but I think there are some books that have to be a must read. Two of them are from Ilan Pappé, who again is an Israeli historian. One is The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This other one that I'm about to say, it's a bit more approachable, more easy to read and to navigate. It's called The 10th Myth of Israel, and it explores the 10th most accepted realities that he debunked as myth about Israel and the Israeli creation, including a land without a people for a people without a land, for example, about Hamas. So it's a very good book to start from, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Palestine, a 4,000-year history, that is very good as well. If you Google Avishlam memoir, he's another Israeli historian. He defined himself as a Jewish Arab because he is a Jewish of Iraqi descendant, and then he moved to Israel, and then he's another historian, and so his memoir is extremely good.
Oh no, I'm not sure about this, but this is one that has stayed with me since I read it in high school, which is Fadwa Tuqan's memoir.
Oh,
which
absolutely,
is,
yes.
Rihla Jabaliya, Rihla Saba. In English, I think it's A Mountainous Journey.
Yes.
It's a really good read. It's a really good book.
Yeah.
And she is her poems and her writings are very beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, I would say everything.
Yeah, everything written by Fadwa Tuqan.
Yeah, exactly. And another one is definitely another memoir that probably a lot of people living in the UK would appreciate is Ghada Karmi, In Search of Fatima, because she is a British Palestinian woman. If you want poetry, everything by Mahmoud Darwish.
But not to be stereotypical, but
no, if you don't know anything, starting from Mahmoud Darwish is probably the basic. But there are so many new, Palestinians are amazing artists.
Ghassan Kanafani.
Now as well. At the moment I'm reading American Palestinian poet called George Abraham. Poetry collection is called Birthright. Is fantastic. I am literally swimming in it because it's beautiful. But also, if you want some other books, it's a book that came out a few years ago, 2018, that is quite rich, and it focuses on what happened in Palestine before 1939, and it's called The Parisian by Isabella Hamad. Extremely fantastic novel. Susanna Bulhawa, Against the Loveless World, another beautiful book.
Just read for Palestinian writers. I mean, Palestinian writers are incredible.
We are some of the best.
Yeah.
There are some. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm very partial because
There's one that my friend I haven't read this, but the 100-Year War in Palestine.
Yes.
My friend read this having known nothing about the history of Palestine, and it gave him a really good understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, do you not acknowledge that Palestinian children are indoctrinated from birth to want to kill Jewish people?
I have never been indoctrinated, have you?
No.
I feel am I left out?
Yeah,
no.
If that's the case, we have been left out.
Yeah,
there you go.
No, so, yeah, I can tell you from my perspective as a Palestinian growing up in Jordan is that I have never been taught to hate a single individual based on their religion or their ethnicity or any of their lifestyle or beliefs or anything about them. Have you?
No. Actually, it comes to mind, speaking again about writers, there is this beautiful poem by Rafif Ziadah called We Teach Life, Sir. I suggest to whoever asked that question to go and listen, because you can find it on YouTube. Call it Rafif Ziadah, We Teach Life, Sir. Because it looks like we have nothing else to do in our life than hate people. But actually, our culture is so rich. The only thing I have been taught is food, music, poetry. Dressing, stitching. Why would you waste your life hating people? It's such a poor way of living your life.
Yeah, and I have been thinking about this over the past 6 months, I think, more so than ever before in my life.
Yeah.
Is understanding the trauma that our grandparents had to go through or like in my case, my grandparents had to go through, and the loss that they had to endure, and in the end to become like the most loving people that you know I have ever met. Like, it's to the point where like my grandma was the type of person who would let a mosquito kind of just land on her and feed off of, yeah, because she'd be like, it's another creature, it needs this so that it can live, who am I to take it away from her? So when I think about like how soft and kind these humans have been throughout my life as a 30-year-old, knowing them, and then knowing like now understanding more of what happened to them when they were children, I'm in awe of like of how beautiful they turned out despite the trauma, because trauma hardens us, and trauma does make us angry, and it does make us rageful. So does oppression, and it should. But I think that if anything, like my grandparents have also taught me that even though you have this trauma or this pain of oppression, it doesn't stop you from living beautifully and enjoying the beauty of the people around you and the community around you. And you can do both. You can have that anger and that rage and fight the oppression while also enjoying the company of the people that are around you that are also beautiful and who do not wish death or destruction upon you and your people as well, you know?
Yeah. And another thing is like the colonization have to start from the mind. So we Palestinians are probably like pro now in decolonizing our mind, and hate, and it's a form of colonization. So
100%.
No. Another personal example that I can give is that my Palestinian father lives in Italy, and recently he has been asked by some of these schools in Italy to go and talk about Palestine, and he could have done everything, right? But you know what he did? He's a musician and an artist, and he brought his oud and he brought his nai, and he just played songs and taught these kids to dance dabke. This is what happens. And I think another thing I want to add is like, once again, a question like that dehumanize so much and take away from Palestinians some of their excellence. Like, Palestinians are among some of the most educated people in the world. The majority of Palestinians go to school and they achieve extremely high level of education.
I think the literacy rate is like 98%.
I think it's 98%. Yeah, I had the same numbers in my mind.
And that was with all the barriers that exist there.
Like, despite the occupation, despite the apartheid wall, despite the wars, Palestinians are some of the most educated people in the world. And it's like, the fact that we are asked is like that we have been taught hate is like
healing from trauma, healing from extreme trauma. Like, you know, if we were to hold on to that, then we wouldn't be here right now, you know? Like, if our grandparents were to hold on to that, then we probably wouldn't exist in this moment, and we wouldn't be able to kind of spread their stories and talk about. So I think like resistance comes with love always. Like, love is at the forefront of resistance. I know, 100%. And I encourage, not now unfortunately, but as soon as the situation is a bit calmer and if you feel safe, and I say you to whoever is listening, go and visit if you can, because you will see how much love there is in the people of the West Bank, and hopefully there is a Gaza to visit. Hopefully there is a united Palestinian country to visit. Is it Gaza or
Palestine or both? It's Palestine.
It's Palestine. Gaza is a part of Palestine.
Yeah. So Gaza is a little strip. This is why it's called the Gaza Strip. It's a little strip southwest of what it was historical Palestine. And it's on the sea, but Gaza is part of Palestine. The West Bank is Palestine as well. When the people talk about two-state solution, they think about a Palestinian state between Gaza and West Bank. Once again, we hope for from the river to the sea, one country with equal rights for all the people who live there. Okay, I would like to know more about Palestinian culture before the colonization genocide, and what are Sammie and Sabrin's favorite things from their culture?
I like this question.
Yeah, I love it. A bit of love. Okay. When they talk about colonization and genocide, now or 75 years or even 100 years, if we think about the Balfour Declaration, I don't know. What can I say is that Palestinian culture is extremely rich. One of the most rich aspects, for example, of Palestinian culture is the tatris, that it's the embroidery. Actually, I have a, I mean, this defy the purpose. The jumper I'm wearing kind of defy the purpose because it's a print of the tatris. But I kind of like it. I sort of kind of, I thought, I think it's a kind of a funny paradox about it. But the tatris, for example, is such an old, ancient, traditional way of expression for Palestinian women, especially. Consider that each village had its own colors and its own design and patterns.
Symbols, yeah.
And all the symbols have different meanings. And they were used to communicate as well. And also, we are speaking about something so, like, you can still see in some museums and in some collections, you can still go and see dresses of the late 19th century, 1870 or 18, like, it's such an old tradition. And it also came with headdresses and coins and
it's so diverse. Like, you can't really pinpoint one area basically because each city had their own
and its own colors as well.
And because there were so many different communities that were already living in Palestine, you had a different diversity of cultural exchange and not appropriation, where there was a lot of cultural appreciation between the different communities as well.
Yes, and also the different dresses had different uses. Of course, the bridal dress, it has always been one of the major thing. So the tatris is just one of the example, for example, of such a old way of expressing our culture. But Palestinian culture is extremely rich. I think you can go on YouTube and see videos of the early 20th century and see the beauty of Jerusalem, or like
just people going about their lives, like
exactly, or Jaffa and Akka. It's so rich.
And it was different from city to city. Like, I remember my grandparents would always say, like, my grandpa would be like, I'm from the beach, like, I'm from Jaffa, so I'm from the beach, so I'm very chilled out. We're from a very chilled out city or town, like where he was from, Beit Dajan. It's a small town, but they were very chilled out. Whereas, like, he'd be like, these city people, they were always stressed out.
And Bethlehem, my family is originally from Bethlehem. Those are very much hills country. Like, my grandfather, before 1948, he had a motorbike, very cool. He had a motorbike and used to go quite ahead of his time. And he used to go from Bethlehem to Beirut for lunch and back. And he would stop at Akka and talk with the fishermen because he had farm animals. He was a butcher. And so he was very curious about the fisherman life. So we're speaking about something that is extremely rich. And to get to the second part of the question, what is my favorite thing? Is food.
Definitely the food.
I think Palestinian will answer, what is your favorite thing? Food.
Food, 100% the food,
Food, it's so diverse. The coast has traditions, the inner land has traditions, the cities has traditions. And, some people do hummus in a way, some other people do hummus in a, do you put garlic? Don't you put garlic? Do you put cumin? Don't you put cumin?
Very seriously.
Yeah, there you go. And my favorite food is mansaf. It's kind of Jordan influenced. But then there is in Sahan and maglube is probably, I think a lot of people heard about maglube. That means upside down. Because you stuff the pot as it was a sandcastle, and then you...
I made maglube last week. It was beautiful.
Exactly. So food is the answer.
Mahshi is beautiful. Like,
and music, I would say food and music.
Music, especially like old-timey music. Of course, though, when I say old-timey music, it's a bit recent because I mean like 80s and before. But in our school in Jordan, we used to have a night that was like the traditional night. And that was always so beautiful because you had like different cultures come together, but it was like always predominantly Palestinian as well. And the tobes were mixed in with the food, mixed in with like the music and the dabke all together in one place creates such a nice vibe as well. Like,
Two questions together. What would you say to those who claim that protesting on the streets in the US, UK is useless and won't achieve anything? So that's one. But we're putting it together with, I have a question about advocacy rather than Palestine itself. How do you get family, or people in general, more inspired to be involved? Family that may be sympathetic but overall doesn't talk about it that much.
Okay, so let's start with the first one.
Yeah.
We are seeing every day that protesting on the streets in the US, UK, and etc. all over the world, it does achieve something and it does make a big difference. Like, I think a lot of the people who say that protesting on the streets of the US and UK specifically are saying this because they don't understand the UK and the US's complicity in everything that's happening. And we can demand that our governments do better. We can demand that we stop selling arms to Israel. We can demand that we stop giving them money, like, especially with America and the tax money that is going to.
Yep.
Like, we are in charge of where our taxes go. And I would like we have a homelessness crisis in the UK. People are homeless in the UK and there are no places to keep them. We have a food crisis. We have a cost of living crisis that never ended. And yet we're still sending tax money to Israel so that they could kill innocent Palestinians. In the protest, that is our chance to say, do not do that with our money. Do not do that with our, this is our agency over what we do with our funds and with our support systems, where we allocate them and where we put them. And the protests are the people coming together and saying, do not spend my money on war, do not spend my money on genocide, spend it where I want it to be. The reason that we know that they are making a difference is because, frankly, fascist actors in government have been coming out and really kind of criticizing the marches without ever having been a part of them in the first place. So when you have people that are calling them hate marches and that are spreading Islamophobia, we come together to say, actually, we reject that and we reject you and your rhetoric as well.
Things are changing. They really are.
Even though we can't see it in a very straight...
Yeah, but I can tell you something quite easily, right? In 2021, when there was another war on Gaza, it was almost impossible to hear people talking about Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Now it looks like people can't stop talking about us. And it seems like a stupid difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. Young generation are very hard to fool about what is happening in Palestine, while my generation, when we were young, no one talked about it. Things are changing. And also, there is something that, in my opinion, is very important to understand, is that we live in a society that is telling us that everything has to be obtained immediately. So if you protest today, changes has to happen tomorrow. Because that's capitalism, that's consumerist societies. My strong dream is that the way we protest and the way we are asked for change and the change we are trying to manifest and bring about is actually gonna go not only towards saving Palestinian people, but also saving us as humanity and against capitalism. And one of those things is accepting that not everything is product, but it can just be a process. It can just be a movement. So those protests, maybe that you don't see the consequences of this protest the day after the protest happen, but they're building up momentum, they're building up community, and they're building up movement. They are encouraging people to speak up, they're encouraging people to come out, they're encouraging people to feel safe. They are making a huge difference. And of course, because they haven't stopped for 6 months, things are also gonna start changing. Like we have seen recently, San Francisco in the US, the biggest town to actually ask for a ceasefire. Not only we need hope, but we also need to understand that saying that these things don't bring about change is a way used by the propaganda for, don't do that because it doesn't make any change. It does, then do it. Yeah, we really need to do it.
And I think it's like you said, this is a process. Palestinians have been working and talking about this for over 75 years now. And we understand that it's not something that will happen overnight. It's something that is a process that will take time, and we're here for it. Palestine may not be free tomorrow, but when it is, we are going to be here.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah. And we will keep working towards it. And we hope that the people that, I've had friends here in the UK that have said to me, I've never known anything about this. And I kind of had to do a double take, because I was like, how do you not?
Yeah.
But then I kind of understood that you guys learned something different in history class.
Yep.
And that's why it became important to talk about it more and raise awareness, because it's there are people who have actually never heard about what's happening in Palestine, and they need to know. People just need to know so that they can make their own informed decisions.
Yeah. And actually on Saturday, we were at the march, and there was someone holding a picture of one of the of the Palestinian child who died of starvation. And there were a group of teenagers that were just, messing about around town, and they were with their bicycles, and they came across the march. They stopped because they were curious about what was happening. And I saw one of these young teenagers looking at the pictures of the starving kids and literally do that with their hands in front of their mouth and with their eyes big. Now I'm telling you, if the only thing that march on Saturday achieved was for that teenager to be shocked into something and question it and maybe go home and start looking at it, that was a massive win.
Mm-hmm. Also, I remember through some of the actions that we've had going back home, and on my way home, I would be hearing people talk about it. And I don't even know if it's positive or negative or in what context they're talking about it, because I'm just passing them by as they are walking past me. But it is making a difference in that it does get people to talk about it more and discuss it more, and understand where their understanding stops and where they need to do more research and more information, building and diving as well. So keep going to those protests.
And also keep going for these protests, not just for Palestine, but for any democratic future. Mm-hmm. Because if we stop protesting, that means that we're giving up on actually fair and equal and green post-capitalist world that I really hope is.
And it's important to also mention, we do not only march for Palestine, we march for Palestine and for all the oppressed people. So in a few weeks, I know that we are going to be marching for Palestine and Sudan, as we do every time we have speakers from different people who are oppressed come and speak in the Palestine protests. It is to basically decolonize and to get more awareness about the oppression of all of us in the world, not just in Palestine.
This is definitely a global movement, and it's a movement that wants to bring a different future to the world, not just for Palestinians.
A few weeks ago, we also had a queer march, a feeder march into the Palestine march, and that was a beautiful display of solidarity as well.
And to get into the second question, the one about how do you get your family inspired to be involved, sometimes it's not easy, but I would say you don't have to start from the march or the protest if you feel like your family is or your friends are a bit concerned about it. There are so many events going on right now. Start easy,
And sometimes it's not even if they are still at that place where they're not even ready to go to an event. I think it's important to also understand the dehumanization that has been happening over decades to Palestinians, Muslims, and Arabs in general, and start challenging that as well. So I know that a friend of mine told me that they made musakhan for their family as a way of starting a conversation in the holidays about Palestinian culture and Palestinian people. Sometimes you might have to start even before going straight into let's go to an event. You might need to start challenging those preconceived notions about Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians in general that lead to people not caring or to thinking of us as something other than human in a way, because this is a big thing that happens where people are well, it's not impacting me. So they don't look like me. They don't speak my language. So what is my connection to them? Start connecting with people based on simple things like culture and beautiful things that we have to offer as well.
And there is a lot in terms of actions. There is a lot of things that you can do very comfortable, very safe, donating money, signing petition, writing to MPs, even helping someone who is very active right now. And we were talking about that. There are people who are literally working full-time and then working full-time for Palestine, that maybe they haven't done their laundry in weeks, or they didn't have a proper meal in weeks. Even just convincing, I don't know, if your grandma is sympathetic, but she doesn't know what to do, ask them to prepare some food to bring to a friend that is giving them all to the cause, because that I can tell you, I would love that. You can do small things like that.
I've had some friends offer to do my laundry, which is really nice. The next one is why are the most of the kibbutzim next to Gaza or the West Bank? So they play a role.
I think for me this is quite simple to answer, because once again, it was not a land without people. It was a land with people who had already a great system of agricultural, they had already a strong agricultural economy and agricultural system. So one of the main reasons why kibbutz were very close and are still very close to Palestinians' villages and Palestinians' places is because there were already agricultural system happening there. It's literally taking over.
Also, a lot of homes were simply not even demolished. Like, a lot of homes were taken over just as they are. Like,
yes.
The people of them were kicked out, and then the new people moved in without even demolishing
with
the
furniture
homes.
And everything. There is this beautiful book, once again, books by Ghassan Kanafani, of course. I think it's in English, is Return to Haifa, that actually talks exactly about how people just enter the house. Settlers coming in and taking the house
as
it is. And also, we saw it was in 2021 or even earlier, that there is this video that became sort of viral where there is this settler called Jacob.
Yeah, if I don't steal it, then
someone else will steal it. So one of the reasons why a lot of kibbutz are already in areas close to the Palestinians' villages is because they were
villages.
Yes, and they were already cultivated, and it's not true. The other myth that Israel made the desert bloom. What? Like,
Palestine was never a desert.
Yes. The agriculture was so developed. It was insane.
It's also on one of the most fertile areas in the world. Like, yeah.
There is this other beautiful movie. I think it's called The Orange Clockwork.
Oh, I haven't seen this.
And it's about the whole economy around orange and orchards and yeah.
That's beautiful.
Jaffa cakes, by the way, just so you know.
Jaffa cakes?
They're called Jaffa cakes for one reason.
Yes. What is the political system in Palestine? Are there political parties or factions? Are there elections, and how are they run? What role does Hamas play in the political landscape? What, if any, participation do Palestinians have in the Israeli political system?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I would start by saying it is very, very hard to have a political system and fair elections in a state of constant war and occupation.
Yes.
And for those parties or factions to actually be representative of the people in such environments.
Yeah, and once again, we said this before, let's remember that this is by international law, occupied country, occupied territories. The West Bank and Gaza are divided, both politically, economically, socially, and geographically. Of course, this is done on purpose as well. This is a colonial strategy as well. And so the systems in the West Bank and in Gaza are quite different. We kind of talk about the Palestinian Authority. There haven't been elections. I think the last time...
2006, I think.
Yeah. The reason why there are an election, it's multiple. One is because people in power, as we said, are puppet of Israel, so they don't want to lose power. So the main party right now, it's Fatah. It was the party of Arafat, and now it's the party of Abu Mazen. But there haven't been elections. Again, I think since last time was 2006 or 2007. And one is because Israel has also decision over that. They can say yes or no. And one of the no is because probably Hamas would win if there were fair election now. And one of the reasons why Hamas would win, even if people are not really behind a lot of the strategies of Hamas, at least they are an alternative to the Israeli occupation.
And to parties that are controlled by the Israeli
Exactly.
occupation.
What a lot of people also do not realize, it's some of the most brilliant politicians and leaders of Palestinian movements that could be a real alternative, both to the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, are actually arrested and are political prisoners, and they have been in prison for 30 years on and off. I think that is an extremely important aspect to take into consideration when you try to understand the political system in Palestine, that a lot of the popular leaders are actually in prison, and even if they try, as many political prisoners before them, like Mandela, even if they try to do something from prison, they're still into prison. And one of the things that happened recently is that during the last 6 months is that some of the most prominent political prisoners have actually been put into isolation to avoid any sort of communication with outside world or with between each other during these 6 months.
And I think like we do see it every day now in Gaza, where people who are most prominent, like even like in society, get killed and murdered, and then they are being called terrorists to explain their murders. And this is something that like takes us back to as well, like what is the definition of a terrorist? If the state exists in a way where they can call anyone they want a terrorist, then they are going to discredit anyone that they want.
Yeah.
And that goes also for political parties that for any reason might defy Israel.
Yeah. And by the way, this like that's also, you know, this is not new, you know. It has happened in the past 70 years, 100 years. Actually, some of, you know, Ghassan Kanafani, who is a writer but also was a political leader, he was killed because he was considered a great leader. So there you go.
And that's also why we always say it's not about Hamas.
Yes, it's not about Hamas, because we're speaking, by the way, Hamas was founded in the 80s. Well, what we're speaking about, it's a 75-100 years history. So we really need to contextualize everything. Yeah. So the other one, what, if any, participation the Palestinians have in the Israeli political system? So,
complex as well.
Complex, hard.
There are some attempts, like even in videos, to explain the hierarchy of identities in the Israeli kind of system, but maybe you can...
the one thing that to like, I think it can be quite intricate to understand, and it doesn't make any sense, is that in Israel there is a difference between holding a citizenship and your nationality. So you can be a citizen, and so you have right to vote. But if your nationality is not Jewish, then you have less rights than someone that is a citizen of Israel with a Jewish nationality.
Apartheid.
Yes. And actually, in 2018, it was made into a constitutional law. So that Israel is the nation state of Jewish people. So by constitution, Israel is a discriminatory country. So by constitution, they are not a democracy anymore.
And it is the fact that like Palestinians, even like Palestinian Jews, are then discriminated against within the system as well.
Yes. Yeah. And so, for example, you can say about Palestinians in Israel can vote. Yes, they can. By the way, we are speaking about 19% of the population, 19. So even if they vote, they rarely get many seats in the Knesset. But then there are laws that allowed for member of the Knesset to kick out other member of the Knesset if they do stuff that they are not happy about. Actually, that happened quite recently in the last 6 months as well. So political representation, it's hard and minimal. Also, there is a series of laws in general. Amnesty actually has compiled a list of all the discriminatory laws that there are in Israel. The biggest one is the access to the land. So it has been demonstrated that Palestinians in Israel cannot or have hardly any access to own or rent or cultivate land. Mainly of all the land of Israel, Palestine have access sometimes to only 20% of it. So that is discriminatory per se. There is a huge problem with socioeconomical things. So there is less access to education. There is less access to health. The Palestinian population in Israel is the poorest. One of the huge problems that, you can read lots of articles about it is discrimination in the health system. Recently, for example, they tried to pass a law where Palestinian mother should have not given birth in the same ward of Israeli mothers, Jewish Israeli mother. It's quite complex to navigate, but it's a highly discriminatory system.
And there are different levels of discrimination. So this is just on one level, and then there's different levels within those levels of discrimination.
Yes, 100%.
Palestinians are also not given any kind of agency in any of their day-to-day life and things like that. So they will get harassed while going to school. They'll get harassed and policed in their education and things like that.
Yeah.
So, Who are some of your favorite Palestinian music artists? Which are your favorite cities in Palestine? I would like to visit all of them.
Yes. Okay.
I think just from what I've grown up hearing about Jaffa. It's definitely one where I would really like to visit.
Yeah.
Nablus also. I'm partially from Nablus as well. Really want to visit Nablus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Music there is so many, but I am very partial to a group that was very famous in the end of the 80s. That's called Sabrin, my same name.
Partial.
Very partial because I actually got my name from them.
I was gonna ask, are you named after them?
Yes, I was named after them because my father was a big fan, but also a friend.
That's amazing.
And you can find all their music on YouTube and on Spotify as well. They have some extremely beautiful. And the reason why I like them is because they took traditional folk song and put them into music, or they took poetry and put it into music. I really, really love that group. Also, like, the name is Duo Sabil, but it's also the name of their album, and it's a musician who plays the oud and a musician who played tabla, and it's just that. It's one of my favorite album to play. I can listen to it like non-stop. Oh, the Trio Gibran. The Trio Gibran is 3 brothers that all of them play oud. They are fantastic as well. In terms of city, Jaffa is pretty high up for me as well. And there is my favorite seafood restaurant in Jaffa that is still managed by Palestinians. And it's just divine. I still have the taste of crab that I ate there.
Fresh crab.
In 2019, Akka is probably one of the most romantic one for me because it's an old town and it still has the old walls. It's on the Mediterranean Sea. I love Birzet a lot. Birzet is just a small village, but I have so many memories about it. So and Nablus for Knafe.
Nablus for Knafe.
Yes. And then I like places like Jifna. Jifna is an extremely small village, but it's famous for its apricots. And it's beautiful in May. Oh, God, I can, like, if I start with, like, I'm very nostalgic right now because I couldn't go.
Yeah,
I haven't been able to go.
I think, like, having not been able to go, I'm like, I want to go everywhere.
We should go together.
Yeah, we should go together. Let's plan this trip.
Yes, let's do it.
Sometimes people can mean well, but end up actually being unhelpful towards a cause. Therefore, is there anything people, also specifically from the pagan and witchcraft communities, should do in regards to Palestine? Thank you for your time. Sent with solidarity. Oh, that's cute.
So I like that they should not do what people should, even if they want to help, what they should not do.
Yeah, I think this is like very common where I think people start projecting a lot and they stop listening to actual Palestinians. And this is like a big thing where like we feel passionate about something. So like, for example, like Palestine needs a socialist government now. And I'm just like, or the Palestinian workers need to go up and do this and this and that. And I'm like, maybe we don't tell people what they need or what to do.
Yeah.
Maybe we listen to them and we amplify their voices.
Yeah.
So the way that we kind of like view things is that we love support from everyone. Like all support is nice. And it's like you said, people mean well. But it's when voice of the support drowns out the voice of those being oppressed, I think that's when it becomes harmful.
Yeah.
When what you want for people goes over what they might need or what they might want for themselves, is that does become harmful sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens within the Palestinian community in itself. Because as I said, they divided us pretty badly. So there are Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinian in Gaza, Palestinian in the diaspora, and we all have different level of trauma and different level of how this genocide is affecting us. Of course, though, Gaza is the most affected one. So I am, for example, at fault of some of what Sammie just said about recently someone asked me, do you think that the power of imagination can really help Palestinians to overcome all the trauma we are going through at the moment? And I was like, yes, 100%. And then there was another Palestinian man remind me, you can't say that people of Gaza will have to answer that question for themselves. And I was like very humbled by that. Because of course I can say, yes, I believe that the power of imagination can really help us overcoming trauma and moving forward. But what Palestinians in Gaza are living right now is probably something that rarely humanity have ever seen. So we do not know, actually. And so, yeah, thank you for saying that. We really need to understand that even if we want to support and we want to be optimists and we want to do things, we really need to always go to the people who are suffering the most at the moment.
And I think like education from like listening to your Palestinian friends, to those around you, because like I've seen people who are really well-meaning but say things that are actually harmful to the cause, not because they don't mean well, but because they don't know the history or the facts.
Yeah.
So also that's a very big thing that people should be learning more about as well, especially if you're going to be like advocating and using your voice.
Yeah. And another things that I have seen recently, it's please do not exploit the tragedy.
Yeah.
I have seen people being very active and very vocal, but rather for the spotlight than
We
for...
can name some names.
Yeah. For the actual what is happening. So, you know, every now and then it's good to do a self-check and making sure that this is taken seriously and not as a PR, personal PR moment.
I think, one big thing that I've been like very, very kind of adamant on is like, if you're going to have like any kind of body that is doing panels, that is doing events, that is doing like awareness work or like action, make sure that you have Palestinians at the center of it as well. It's like, it is an important thing that like, for example, if you have a panel of 5 people speaking about Palestine and none of them are Palestinians, that's
There's a problem.
Yeah, that's an issue.
There is definitely a problem,
You need to make sure that you're highlighting those voices. You are giving them the spaces that they need.
Yeah. And also,
deserve.
the other way around, another problem is like that you seek Palestinian voices that already fit the narrative. Like the poor abused women is one of the favorite one in the UK. And it's like, that it's very damaging. Very, very damaging.
Using queer people to justify pinkwashing.
Yes.
We don't like that.
Yes. Or Christianity.
Yeah.
You know, Christian Palestinians as abused by Muslim Palestinians. Like, what?
And erasing Christian Palestinian communities as well, because they are prominent in our communities.
Yeah. I'm a Christian Palestinian. But I mean, I'm an atheist Palestinian. So there you go. We exist as well.
I'm a practicing ex-Muslim, so...
Yeah, there you go. We are quite strange here.
Yeah.
Okay, I think like this question of this page, I'm gonna ask it to you. How can I help LGBTQ plus communities, I'm gonna put it plural, in Palestine?
The first thing that comes to mind right now is like in the way that you would help all people in Palestine. Use your voice, protest, donate, do what you can to raise awareness. If you're interested specifically in LGBTQ communities in Palestine, one really good resource might be if you go on Instagram and you look up Queers in Palestine. So there's Queers for Palestine and Queers in Palestine. Queers in Palestine has posted a lot of important information against pinkwashing as well. And one thing about queer Palestinians is that we reject pinkwashing. Pinkwashing is an abuse of ourselves as well and our identities. And it comes in different ways and shapes that we can talk about for a long time as well. But educate yourself about it. Educate yourself about the impact of pinkwashing. And honestly, just have conversations with us, talk to us. And that is a big one. And also, moreover, is like to understand how deeply impacted communities are by pinkwashing. This goes a long way. I always, like, I could talk about this for hours again, but I always say, like, Israel is a big barrier in front of the rest of the Arab countries also around Palestine being able to be more accepting of and like be more inclusive of queer Palestinians and Arabs. And that's because we are so deeply impacted by what Israel is doing to our people on a daily basis. So for us to be able to, and like, not to mention that a lot of these homophobic laws that exist in the Arab countries at this time are a direct result of colonialism. They did not exist before British rule. That is a very big thing to understand. Like, if we were to unpack the impact of pinkwashing on Palestine, Palestinians, and the region, this would take like a whole lecture, I think. But yeah, it's the same for all Palestinians. Like, honestly, speak about it, talk about it, advocate. Just to give like a very, very brief example, like the fact that Israel would, when they found out that a Palestinian was queer back in the day, or even now to this day, I think what they would do is they would blackmail that person, and they would put them in a position where we will out you to your family and threaten you with violence if you don't work for us or if you don't give us information. So that's a big part I think it was specifically very common in the 70s and 80s as well.
It's still done now.
It's still done now. And like, when you talk about like that violence in itself, if you if you do that to a community and you take people from that community, you blackmail them to working against their own community, it's going to poison that community's ideas about what being queer is and make it seem like it is a big betrayal to the people in the community without it being meaning that you're working for the Israelis. But like as just an example, this could also impact, like if you're growing up in war and trauma, then the idea of having someone not present as like masculine could be seen as a negative, because like you need these men to be fighting your wars, and then you're like, oh, how dare you not live up to our masculine like kind of like idea of what is needed to win a war, for example. This is all a result of trauma and like very deep seated like propaganda within communities as well against queer people.
And it also becomes a matter of prioritization. So I have heard many times, yes, it's an issue, but we first have to fight for liberation, then we will think about women's rights or LGBTQ rights. And that happens also in the countries around. It's like, first we have to fight Islamophobia and the Israeli threat, then we will think about other things.
Also, there's like the idea of like Western ideas. So when the West presents itself as an enemy to the Arab people or an enemy to the Palestinians within their policies and things like that, naturally anything that is perceived to be like coming from the West is going to be perceived as a threat to traditional values or something. And that is a very big barrier as well. It's like currently, because of the pinkwashing and propaganda, because of decades of it, we've reached a point now where queer people in our own communities are seen as outsiders. We're seen as like people who are influenced by ideas of the West. Whereas one of our like the big things that we are doing is like we're actually going like, no, we're just ourselves. We are who we are, and we have a right to exist as well. Also, like if you talk about genocide and people who are being targeted and genocided, birth rates are going to be very important, and continuing that kind of like family structure is going to be very important to the society. So like when you talk about misunderstandings of queerness, then people will be like, oh, but then you can't have a family, you won't have babies, and then you know our people will stop existing. So that is seen as another kind of threat. There are many things to unpack when it comes to like queer rights in the Arab region and in Palestine. It all starts with getting rid of colonialism and decolonizing, and then we can start talking about how we can challenge our own people. And those like kind of things that were born out of pinkwashing and trauma. Because as far as I'm concerned, like having done some Islamic studies and some historical studies, I'm not convinced that Muslims are inherently queerphobic. I'm not convinced that Arabs are. I am convinced that this is a result of colonization.
I'm gonna put these three questions together. I have written to my MP and has a response. I go to marches and I post on my social media. I cannot go on strike from work as I would lose my job, but I want to be able to support where I can. What can I do to help? This is one. Also, how can an individual contribute and help stop the crisis going on in Gaza? And also, best charity to donate to help protect children in Palestine.
Okay, so for the first one, you are doing so much. That's incredible.
Yes.
That's amazing. Keep doing that. That's incredible. If you're looking for other things that you can do to help, I mean, it does look like you are doing everything in your power as well. But I know that there has been like a pledge to like withhold taxes as well that I have done myself. That's another level of like, what can we do? Like some people are looking into whether we can withhold our taxes until the genocide is like stopped, basically, to say that we are as a form of protest. So there is a form going around, but I think like you are doing all of the things. Can you think of anything?
Yeah, well, probably what we were saying before. Can you reach out to people in your community that are maybe the organizers of this march, like, you know, that they need help in their personal life? Or do you know maybe Palestinians in your community that maybe need some help? Because I can speak for myself, but now it's a bit better. Now we kind of sort of, I don't want to say get used to it, but we are sort of pacing ourselves a bit better now. At the beginning, a lot of Palestinians were completely like all over the place, and, you know, not sleeping, not eating, not doing it. can you reach out to some Palestinians in your community maybe, and see if they need any help? Donating is something else. If you can't donate money because maybe it's not viable to you, can you organize something that collects money then can go to help Palestinians in need? But you are doing a lot. And also remember, there are other forms of protesting that it's by going against what our society expects from us. Can you rest?
Yeah, that's a big one. Self-care. Self-care is so important because like we can get so caught up in doing everything all at once because you think about it and you're like, this needs to end now, but we are not carrying this on our shoulders alone. We are all together. This is a communal effort. This is a collective effort. So you need time for self-care. Make sure you put that time in so that you don't get burnt out, because the last thing that people really need is to get burnt out and not be able to fight anymore.
Yeah, you have to think about this as activism and movements and solidarity as a choir. We are all singing, but if you stop singing for like a half a minute, the choir is still there. If you stop singing because you burn out and you don't sing anymore, then the choir will feel it. So, recharging and self-care and resting, and maybe also encouraging people in your community to do so, that could be very, very helpful actually.
In some of our friend groups, we've started care pods, and like we have some well-being groups as well, to make sure that even if one of our friends, let's say, is not paying attention to their own self-care, others can even kind of tap them on the shoulder and be like, do you want to take a break? I'll help you with this so that you can take some time.
Yeah. How can an individual contribute to help and stop the crisis going on in Gaza? Sort of what we were saying, writing to MP, go to marches and protest, withhold your tax monies. If you can go on strike, go on strike. Do you have a union? Are you part of a union? See how you can organize that. You get organized in your union.
Also, Palestinians from Gaza themselves have told us that us posting and talking about it is a great help to them. So even on a day where we feel like our bodies are exhausted and we can't really go out into the street and do the actions, we can just stay home and like have a relaxed day where we post things online and we work on like raising awareness online as well.
Yeah. Can you talk to people? Because some of us are very good talkers, that we talk, or some of us are very good linkers. Can you link people together maybe? Like if you know two people that are maybe struggling with the same thing and want support, can you put them together? Once again, do not focus on the final product per se, because it's a movement. It's gonna take time. It's a process, but keep doing little things and organize and get together.
No one person can carry this weight alone, so we all support each other.
Yeah.
Best charity to donate to help protect children in Palestine. So medical aid for Palestinians is really good. Yes, we love them. But
we need to also pay attention to charities. This is why I like HIRN, Hebrew International Research Network, because they are actually a grassroots movements, and they bring the help where they can, where it is needed at the moment. So the money goes to them, and then they literally ask the community, where do you think we need the money to go to? And they do it. And it can be something simple as this family, the settler have just destroyed their car and they need the car to go to work, and they will buy the car for their family. Or it could be the school has been just destroyed, let's build another school. It was based in Hebron, Al-Khalil, but it's also, they are based really wherever the people needs it. You can donate to them through Amos Trust. That it's another very good place to donate.
There's a few people who are on the ground who are collecting, like Sanabel team, for example. They collect your donations and they feed people on the ground. I think they're currently doing it in Rafah, if I'm not wrong. There's also there's something that I found that was called the Operation Olive Branch, which is not specifically for people in Palestine. Well, it is for people in Palestine. It's for the families who are trying to leave at the moment, to leave Gaza. They've collated all of the GoFundMes into one big master sheet, and they are helping kind of see who's at the highest level of needs and allocating the funds according to that. So that's really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Locally here, we have had two wonderful humans who have just come back from Egypt, where they went coaches to Gaza. So they went to Egypt and they took about 14,000, I think, in donations, and they used that money to help Palestinian families settle into Egypt after they left through Rafah. So that money went to like buying mattresses, getting medications, even covering rent, finding work for people. So there are so many initiatives that are happening.
That was amazing, actually.
Yeah, that was a really...
I really loved that one.
They were incredible, to be honest. So they are still collecting funds because they still have other volunteers who are on the ground as well. So on a more like local Cardiff scale, that's a really good one to donate to. I should also mention like one of the people in our community has also a fund in their son's name, which goes towards supporting families in refugee camps that are like Palestinian refugee camps around Lebanon and Syria. And I will put their link in. I'll give you the link, yeah.
Okay, are we ready for the last question? That was...
That's a heavy question.
That's a heavy question, but I think we just...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, should I read it aloud?
Okay.
Will you ever be able to forgive the world for standing by and allowing this genocide to happen?
I am the worst person at being able to hold a grudge ever. Like,
yeah.
That being said, I think like what has happened in the past 6 months has changed a lot of us, if not all of us, to the like forever. I don't see myself ever going back to the person that I was pre-October.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I am going to like process in therapy.
Yeah.
I think personally, like I'm privileged enough to where in the future I might be able to access therapy, and like there are certain things that I think that it's important to process so that as to not turn into full-on resentment, because I, as a person, I do not live my life with resentment. I live my life with like, I want to be surrounded by people that I love. I think what I've taken more than like people standing aside and watching and like allowing this to happen, I'm taking in the amount of amazing people that have not been standing aside and letting this happen. The people that I see at protests, at events, and it has been so refreshing to meet with these people and to get to know them and to create community with them and to feel safe with them. And in a way, it has been something that inspires like that love for humanity and that like tenacity to keep moving forward as well and to keep fighting. I don't think that we will ever be able to comprehend the amounts of lives and that have been cut short, that have been lost for absolutely no reason. And I don't think I could forgive that. I don't think I can forgive the losses of life and people and land. But it's not, that's something that I think we as a society altogether might not forgive. You know, it's not just me, I don't think.
I could have, I think you answered for me as well. Like I used to be a person who didn't hold grudges. Yeah. Very hard to hold grudges. However, as you said, I don't think Palestinians will ever be the same. Mm-mm. And not just Palestinian. I think every person of conscience will never be the same after what is happening and what we're seeing. You know, we are recording this video a couple of days after Israel withdrew from Al-Shifa hospital. And the massacre that happened there, it's something that is still, like, I haven't fully watched all the images because it gives me anxiety to do it. I know that I will probably lose my sleep for a few weeks if I watched those images. And this is us. Mm-hmm. I can't even start thinking about people in Gaza and how they must. So right now, for me, it's very hard to think about that we will be able to forgive. Definitely, we will never be able to forget. Mm-hmm.
I don't think we should either. Like.
Yeah, exactly. We will never be able to forget. And forgiveness, it's something that we have to work very well through this time.
Mm-hmm. I think, like you said, we haven't even started processing most of the things that we've seen that have happened. Like, because the minute that you think that this is the worst thing that has happened, something worse happens somehow, and it's too much for the brain to even comprehend.
Yeah. So right now, I don't think I have the mental ability to say what I will be able to do. I also believe that the world is gonna be a very different world. This is ongoing. We don't know how it's gonna end. We don't know if it's gonna end. We don't know what is gonna happen to the whole world balance after this. It's very hard. Well, I can tell you more on this small scale personal thing. I have lost friends over this. People who I thought they were friends, but I don't think they're friends. Will I be able to forgive them, for example? Definitely not, as my people are slaughtered in hundreds a day. Because there are priorities in someone's mind. And my priority right now is my people who are dying and not my friends who can't put their privilege on a side to actually do something.
Mm-hmm. This is like the thing that I told you about someone who said to me, "This is too much, you're talking to me on a Tuesday."
Yes.
And I was just kind of like, I didn't realize that Israel stopped bombing people on a Tuesday. Like,
yeah.
You can separate yourself from it, but that's your privilege talking. If you can look away, that's your privilege talking.
Now it came to mind that we were talking about the importance of anger. So we are taught since childhood that being angry is wrong, that angry is for irrational people, that anger is for terrorists. But actually, anger is a very important emotion to hold and to work with and through, because actually anger, when it's well channeled, actually brings important change. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to use forgiveness as a way to silence my anger. Forgiveness and anger should actually go hand in hand.
Or also to make people escape accountability. Like, there are people who should not escape accountability. That means that we fight to make sure that they have that accountability. Yeah.
And also that our people have justice. But as Sammie was said, we also have to focus on all the beautiful things that have happened despite what is going on. And probably for me, the most important thing is like that we are meeting new people, that we are creating new hopes, that there will possibly be a different world coming out of this. Mm-hmm. I feel very humbled and very privileged and very honored to, for example, having met you.
Exactly. This is the start of a really nice friendship.
Yes. And there you go. Yeah. We need to look at the silver lining and once again uphold love above everything else.
Exactly. And we're all in it together. Like, even the people who are watching this, like in the protest, one of the chants that we chant together is, "In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians." And that is to say that we all feel that spirit of anger. We all feel that spirit of like wanting to fight for justice and being one in that fight for justice.
Yes.
So like in that, I think it's like you said, it's understanding that rage is such a useful emotion. It's such a good thing. It's a driving factor, but it's not only for us Palestinians to actually say, "Oh, I'm enraged." No, everyone else should be enraged as well, because to live in a world where this happens without people being enraged would be terrifying.
Yes.
So like us all together, being together in our rage and fighting against it, that's what is needed right now.
Yes. And it means that there are certain aspects of our society that are still healthy, that there is still hope, and that I'm a strong optimist at heart, and I really believe a different world order is to come, and I want to be a part of it, not on the side of it.
Oh,
yeah,
that's beautiful. Okay,
we are done.
We're done.